Hi, everybody. My name is Namrata Bagaria, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Seniors Junction. And today we are going to talk to you about what does Seniors Junction do, what are the different programs, and we've got a wonderful panel who will explain to you our work, our vision, and our underlying philosophy. So let me introduce you to my co-founder, Paul Merkley, who is Professor Emeritus in Musicology, and he will be telling you a bit about what Seniors Junction does. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Namrata, and welcome everyone. Here it is Seniors Day, and we at Seniors Junction want to celebrate it by talking about the question of social isolation and what we can do about it. It's a big problem. It was a problem before COVID, and when COVID can get somehow, when we can get ahead of it, it will still be a problem. Study after study has shown that seniors' isolation makes them more vulnerable to dementia and early death than even smoking or obesity. It's a serious risk for negative health outcomes, and that's not even talking about unhappiness, loneliness, depression. When we say retirement, most people have thought about the financial implications. Maybe they've thought about where they might like to live, but what, as Richard, who's here today, has said, what are we retiring into? We know what we're retiring out of, but what are we retiring into? Retirement doesn't just mean stopping work. If it's the reward for a lifetime of work, what is that reward? Well, with us today is Professor Robert Stebbins, who's going to talk about serious leisure. He coined that term. One of the movies I like, and I always like to explain things by movies, which drives some people crazy because many of the movies I've seen now to them are old movies. But if we think of the movie Cocoon, and we think of the scene in which the man is talking to his deceased wife, he's at the graveside, and he says, well, today I learned how to hook a rug. I used to have the entire garment district in my back pocket, and today I learned how to hook a rug. Well, that's the wrong activity for that man. For him, that's not serious leisure. That's not something that will give him the sense of purpose, nor will it give him shared purpose in which he could have some connectedness with other people. And he could beat that question of isolation. The more we find purpose, the more we share it with others, the more we communicate with them, the more we thrive, and the more retirement becomes enjoyable and fun. And I say this from my own perspective as a retiree and a widower. So I've found my purpose here, and it's a wonderful purpose. It's an important purpose. And I practice serious leisure. We have things called blue zones now in the world where people live longer. And yes, we can talk about concrete things like diet and exercise that people do there. But just as importantly are the social questions, are the communities in those blue zones where people are connected and they have purposeful activities together. Well, to me, this is a celebration possibility of helping people build purpose and find connectedness with all of these folks here that we have on our panel today. Two of them have taken our focus group early courses that we offer at Seniors Junction, because our idea is to offer 8-week courses on a subject delivered by an expert in a way that starts to develop a hobby or an interest that then you can follow up, and you can do this live. It's a cohort-based teaching with other people, and you can start to have purpose and community. So thank you everyone for participating today. Without talking further, I'd like to turn the floor over to our keynote speaker, Dr. Robert Stebbins, Fellow of the Royal Society, who will talk to us. He's the person who coined the term serious leisure. He'll talk to us about that. Please, Dr. Stebbins.
Thank you, Paul. First thing I tell people who ask me when they're retired, and sometimes even before, well, what is leisure? And I could give a definition, but I think at the moment we'll just leave the common sense definition in people's heads and not get into the more technical conceptual details about that question, about its answer. But what is useful is to get people looking at the enormous range of activities that constitute leisure. And I immediately say, have you seen on Wikipedia the list of hobbies? It's worth going to have a look at. It's amazing how many are there. And when I first saw it, I was a bit amazed at how many more I could add to that list. So it's not a list that conforms to the more theoretical side of the study of leisure, including the serious leisure perspective, but at least it talks about activities that people do. So the next thing I do is say, bring up on the website, www.seriousleisure.net, the diagram on the serious leisure perspective. And there it is. And what I do is I start down that list. Let's start with casual leisure, simply because it's what the rest of it is not. And it's what most people do, however. And that includes play. And I think I'll leave you with that. And I don't mean child's play. Doodling with a pencil is play. When you're bored at a meeting or something. Relaxation, taking a nap, sitting back and watching the dog run around the yard. Passive entertainment. Television, the world's leading casual pleasure activity. Active entertainment would be a game of chance game of cards, playing poker, but you're no expert, playing Monopoly, on and on. Sociable conversation, getting together over coffee somewhere, for drinks at the pub. Gossip fits there. Gossip's lots of fun, as long as it's not about you, the speaker. Sensory stimulation, a bus trip to look at the beauty of the Canadian Rockies, or the inspiration of the ocean would be examples. Casual volunteering, somebody's got to take tickets to the door for the high school play. Doesn't require any talent, but it has to be done. Somebody's got to pick up the furniture for the Salvation Army. It takes some brawn, but it doesn't take any expertise. Pleasurable aerobic activity is walking, amongst other things. And it can be pleasurable. All of these activities are enjoyable. So that's important. Let's go to the other side of the chart, over to serious pursuits. And just under serious pursuits on the left, serious leisure, finally. Not casual, because serious leisure is leisure we have to, as it were, work at. If you're going to be a good amateur musician under art, you're going to have to practice the violin or the trumpet or whatever. And you'll get better at it. So you'll see some sense of career, self-improvement, and ultimately, and this is one of the essential features of serious leisure, a sense of self-fulfillment and well-being as a result of that fulfillment. So that can happen in the fields of art, can happen in science. I cut my teeth on this subject studying archaeologists. Later, I rounded it out by a look at astronomers, and the immense commitment and fulfillment to and from those sciences, which with all amateur activities has a professional counterpart. These pros show what what devotion to and a lifetime of work in a field results in. So there's no doubt that the sense of being an amateur is a sense of being in a social world with people who make their living, some kind of living, not always a great living, doing that same activity because they're doing it more or less full time. Sport, it's obvious. Entertainment, I studied stand-up comics and entertainment magicians as two examples of that field. Moving across to volunteer, six types. Popular is people. If you're volunteering in a nonprofit organization, you're likely working with people, being on the board of directors or being a host for organizational events is part of volunteering with people. Idea-based, that's where I would look for volunteers in religion and politics. Material, the handyman is the ideal typical material-based volunteer, unless he or she has become a business person in the area. But most handymen do it because they like the work. Floral, taking care of gardens, knowing which weeds to pull, nothing else, but also how to protect against bugs and watering and pruning and on and on. Funnel, that's where this SPCA works. They use enormous numbers of volunteers to help with the animals. And environmental things like trail maintenance, which we know in the Rockies here for hikers. Over to hobbyists. The difference between a hobbyist and an amateur is that the hobbyist doesn't have a professional counterpart. So they do different things where professionals don't usually, only rarely if ever arise. So collecting plates, collecting dolls, collecting stamps, of course, making and tinkering. Now we're talking about creative activities such as macrame. Building furniture would be an example. Then activity participation is an activity that would be really a sport probably, but there's no professional. Cross-country skiing is an example. And so I studied barbershop singers as activity participants. Sports and games, again, that's obvious. A lot of sports and games too just don't have professional counterparts. There are pros in chess, apparently. I didn't know this, but you might be good at checkers or dominoes. As far as I know, there are no pros there, but you can get damn good at doing it and enjoy it and enjoy the competition. Liberal arts pursuits is my term for the reading hobbies. And some people read a lot. They read all the works that an author wrote, for example, a novelist, or they'll follow a genre of literature. So read as much as they can in the way of Elizabethan plays. But they can read in science, they can read in history, and develop quite an expertise from all of this knowledge. And then over to devotee work, This is a newcomer, but it's basically serious leisure gone to work. And devotee work is like serious leisure, but it can be, the participant gets paid. As I say, it doesn't great pay necessarily. In art, there's the starving artist, even though the evidence is to date that most people that enter the arts professionally do so, eventually end up with a half decent living. And if it's a popular art, then you would have some quite substantial living. Consulting is a liberal profession, but on a one-to-one basis. And what's amateur or what's serious leisure about this is the attitude and the sense of personal fulfillment that comes with pursuing that activity. But it starts as amateur in the pre-professional stage of education. So your med student, law student, would be examples of pre-professional amateurs learning to become pros. And, but they've discovered already what enthusiasm, what excitement, what fulfillment lies in the field that they eventually hope to make a living at. Skilled trades. A lot of carpenters, for example, don't do much that's it's skilled, but it's very routine. And it's, it could be seen as, it is serious work, but something like stonemasonry or furniture making are, when they become remunerative, are also exceptionally attractive as devotee work. So, and then finally, small businesses. Some of them, like cake decorating, like making cookies and that kind of thing, that are sold and become, the archetypical typical example is beer making. And people start out, usually guys, I guess, making beer. They want to have a good beer. And then, hey, this good beer might sell. And then the shoe has dropped. So then they want to see if they can make some money doing it. And sometimes they can. I think we all, if we thought about it and asked about it, could find local breweries where beer makers started as hobbyists. So, and then converted it to devotee work. But serious leisure for which you get paid is fundamentally the definition there. So when I meet people who want to know about leisure, I send them to the website on Wikipedia, and then we sit down with this chart and talk. And my client, as it were, and I do this voluntarily, is keen on some activities and couldn't care less about others. So I match the activities, that person's personality, talents, tastes, qualities like that. And then sit back and say, well, here's how you get started and keep in touch. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stebbins. This was wonderfully informative, good refresher for us why we started Seniors Junction, and we are so grateful for this keynote. And now I would like to actually introduce our panelists who are going to be instructors who can teach you something in liberal arts and help you find your new hobby, which you can make your devotee work. So our instructors are Dr. Paul Merkley, Shayna Anderson, Renata, and myself, Nam. But I will first start off with Renata. Renata, if you can introduce yourself and tell us what you would be teaching in a few words so that students understand.
Sure, of course. So my understanding is what we would be providing, and I work generally with a not-for-profit called the Canadian Tapestry and Texture Center. And through that, we would be providing an 8-week, hour-and-a-half every week visual art program. I do have a small video, but it would primarily work around sketching and painting, with the belief that, just even that sketching, anything done with the hands is very meditative. And depending on the exercises provided, it gives you that sort of calm and provides that sense of connection if you can get multiple people working together. So perhaps I can just run the video if I can share that.
You can do that. I'll give you the rights to.
Sure, and it's short and we don't have to watch the whole thing, but I think visually it'll give you a sense of the type of projects rather than me talking to it. Doesn't want to let me. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay. Okay. So this was the program. This video is a program that was done for seniors. So it would be similar to this, but perhaps less intensity or less frequency, but the projects would probably be quite similar.
Can you make it full screen?
Oh, sure.
And share the sound. Can you do share?
Oh, hang on.
Yes, it's working. The sound is
Can
working.
you hear that?
Yeah.
So you do start to see more online. So that was the reach the program had. So it would be something like this in terms of what's presented. That's how correction is perhaps done on Zoom, right? Or I say correction, but options, visual options. I think we're almost done here. Oh, just let me, so noisy. Hang on one second here while there we go. So that's an example of the type of work that we often do, trying to keep it, over Zoom. It's not always easy, but we have learned how to do it well. I know we have had participants that have hearing issues, and somehow we find a way. And that's the beautiful thing is
when a group arrives, you start to recognize what's happening with everyone, and then you adapt. I mean, if the Zoom experience has taught me anything, is you can adapt on the fly. So for our participants that were struggling with the hearing component, we operated through chat with instructors, right? That instructor that was assigned to help that person would specifically watch for chat from them. And I think actually it was quite beautifully operated, considering. Any questions or?
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you. I will be sharing the information via a brochure, which will be attached to the email
Yes.
that
Yes.
your recreation managers will get from us. So thank you, Renata. Thank you for
Yes.
your time.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure to meet everyone. I'm sorry I do have to go, but it was fantastic to meet everyone. And I'm sure we will chat again.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Renata.
Thank you.
And let me then continue the spirit of introducing you to our instructors. And Shayna, the floor is yours. Can you tell us a little bit about your course?
Yes. So I'm going to offer a piano group-based program. We'll learn some pieces on the piano, some theory, and do some listening ear training activities as well.
And can you share the songs which you told us that they can learn by the end of the introduction?
Yeah, we'll start with Amazing Grace and Let It Be, and also Camptown Races as well. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and Shayna will be continuously be there in offering the courses as you want to upgrade your levels. So yeah, so we begin with 8 weeks, but that's not the end of journey. You can become a piano player in that time.
Yes.
And thank you, Shayna. And moving on,
My pleasure.
Shayna is Paul, who's offering more than one course. And Paul, the floor is yours if you can tell us about the courses you're offering. Paul, can you unmute yourself? I muted you.
Thank you. I'll be teaching a course in film music. The music in films is very important and we aren't always aware of it. So we'll be looking at a lot of examples, starting with silent film and going right up pretty close to the present, seeing what music does in a scene. And you don't have to be able to read music or know anything about music theory to follow the course. We'll probably hear in a few minutes from Richard, who took the course, hear what it was like for him. I'm also teaching a course in Renaissance music. If you're interested in the Renaissance period in history, it all ties together with music and the arts and literature. These are the two fields in which I, as a professor, did my research, and my personal research was in Renaissance music history and in film music. So we've offered both of these courses kind of as a focus group, as small courses, and they've been very successful. I'm very excited about doing it again. Each one has a kind of a workbook or something to read and keep up with. And by the end of it, I think you'll be quite pleased at everything you've learned. I'm also teaching, whether this fall or in the winter, a course in bridge, basic and better bridge, because bridge is a game of purpose and communication and connectedness. And well, need I say more? Bridge, the author Somerset Maugham said, bridge is a wonderful thing. If you're older, you can always play bridge. You can always enjoy getting better at it. And I think that's the part of it. As you learn how to bridge, you become a better and better player. And there are ways for you to climb up that ladder. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul and I together are offering a course on creative expression, writing a haiku, writing blogs, because for many people, writing is something that's they've probably thought about it, and there's a lot of mental barriers. Can I write? Can I not write? So I'm not a trained writer, but I write haiku, and Paul actually taught me how to write a haiku. I write poems, and that's something I learned on my own, and that's something that helps me with coping when there's too much happening. And Paul is a brilliant blog writer. We can share his blogs and his stories. And he's a storyteller, aren't you, Paul?
I am. I love to tell stories.
Yeah. So, so with these rounds of courses, I think let us introduce you to two former students, or rather participants from the focus group courses. So let's, floor is yours, Shayna, Paul, and Richard. Can you all unmute yourselves and just, Paul, you can lead the questions.
Okay. Um, so it's a simple question. What did you get out of taking the two courses, Shayna?
A lot of enjoyment. And for me, I was not familiar with the term serious leisure, but it was something that if I'm going to involve myself in something, I do want it to be serious but enjoyable, and I do want to learn. So that happened for me.
Okay. And did you find your experience growing from week to week or month to month?
Yes.
Very good. Would you recommend it to other people?
Hands down, yes.
Hands down, you would. Okay. Richard, what about you? What did you get out of the courses?
Oh, in both areas, Renaissance music and music and film, it really helped expand my experience and knowledge in both areas, and my appreciation for them. I mean, certainly getting to know the Renaissance music and composers, which I knew very little about, was a great pleasure, and starting to explore their music on YouTube, etc. has been a really an enjoyable eye opener. And the music and film is a really good example of how, when you start to learn about something in more detail, you just appreciate it that much more. And you realize in this particular example how, boy, if you didn't have the music, the entire experience of the film is very different, and usually much less dramatic or much less meaningful. So to really be given a chance to learn about how the music fits in, how it's used, how the whole project of the film was put together, and utilizing the music was a great opportunity, great exploration.
Now, I know you've tried some of the pre-recorded courses that are out there that other companies offer. How would you compare the experience of doing this kind of cohort-based teaching or on live streaming versus that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is you have the instructor right there, and you can ask questions. You can explore points that you may not quite understand or you want elaborated on. You can ask for additional information that might be available online or elsewhere. So being able to have direct access to the instructor, sort of on an ongoing basis and live, so to speak, really puts it in front of some of the courses which are pre-recorded, which can be very good sources of information, and you can sometimes contact the instructor later, but you can't really directly speak to the instructor at that moment. So that certainly is very helpful.
Okay. And I know that, like me, you are a widower and semi-retired. Do you find, and I know you're determined to make more of these years than just stopping and sitting, do you find it fits well with your goals for retirement and your time as being a widower?
For sure. It's easy to put into the schedule, for sure. And I'm quite sure you mentioned that they're recorded and might be available even after the courses. So it's quite flexible, and certainly making it a social weekly gathering of people with similar interests, makes it a nice social gathering of interest, of something worthwhile, that's interesting, that expands your horizons. And yeah, it's a very enjoyable experience.
Thank you. Namrata has said, and this is a question for Shana, Namrata has pointed out that you can be isolated at different ages, and you can be isolated in a crowd or a community. You can have things going on around you, but still feel isolated. I'm wanting to ask Sheena for a minute if younger people ever have a sense of isolation.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And do the courses help?
Yes, they did.
Thank you. Okay. That is our goal. That is
Thank
our
you.
goal.
Thank you,
So
Paul.
thank you very much both. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and I just want to wrap up by saying that that it's been such a pleasure thinking about what we are doing now. And when we were doing a market research, one of the things that came across, a lot of people telling us, I want something to look forward to today, right? I want to get out of the bed and I want to have something to look forward to. And that's something that remained. And this is why we are doing Seniors Junction, so that you have something to look forward to on a weekly basis and eventually on a daily basis as you practice it more and more with the new friends that you make through this program. So thank you so much, everybody. This was a wonderful gathering of the minds, and I hope everybody watching this has a purposeful retirement. So thank you.